Okay, so like this way you can work on this CSS part and you can practice more. Then only you will understand how this CSS will work. Now we have something called text styling. That means you have the text. That means font, whatever you are using, how you can design. That means different color, different font family. There are so many things out there. You can do that. In font, okay, in font, you have the text properties. What are the text properties we have? When we talk about the text properties, basically we have two types of text properties, right? That is, this will actually it will provide by CSS and it will affect the text. The first one you have called as font properties. That means how your font is going to be affected and how the appearance will be there in the font properties. The second one, you have the paragraph. So whenever you define the paragraph, then how the paragraph property will affect the text in the similar way, no matter which font is being used. So one place you are defining the font, another place you are defining the paragraphs. The moment you define in paragraph, then it is not a matter what font you are using. It will define only for paragraph properties. These are the two properties for the text properties we have into the CSS. In CSS, generally we have two types of font family name. One is called generic family and one is called as font family. Okay. In generic family, a group of font families will be with a similar look. Like maybe you have seen in the Microsoft Word when you are using sans serif, serif, monospace. So this all comes into the generic family. When we talk about the font family, you have used also Times New Roman, Arial, Arial Blacks, Black, okay, Arial, Arial Italic. So many things are there. So you can define when you are going to use this one, then it comes into the font family. So these two font family, there are two types. You can define accordingly. You can see here more properties. When you go through the textbooks and different other reference book also to explore more about the font properties. Even you can have a look on any website. Even they will be give you the idea about the font properties. So I have font. You can define any paragraph. You have defined family, style, size, variant, weight in one property. So you can do wonders with this font, different colors of the individual text. Also, you can do that. When you do the font family, that means it will specify what type of typeface or font you need. Like you want the generic font family, or you want the font family, both, anything, whatever you want. Then font size, what size you want, like 4 point, 4 point, 8 point, 10 point, how you want, accordingly you can define. Then similar way font style you can define, that means italic, oblique, and there are others also. Then font variant, here also it is there, like font variant, like you want a small letter or capital letter, or you want regular text, what you want, you can define accordingly. Same way font weight, that means bold, bolder, lighter, you can define, and that value will be differ from 100 to 90, but in multiples of 100, like 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 to till 900 it will be vary, and you can accordingly you can define. This is the font properties you can define. So in the exam they can ask what is the font properties, explain in details. So you should write this entire things and each what is the meaning with this example program also you have to specify. Next, when we talk about the font family, there will be some issues will be there. What issue? We have seen in word processor. That means on our operating system, that is Windows or Linux or Mac, whatever you use, on desktop machine we use. So you have some font will be installed on the computer. but on the browser it is different. Right? Might be you have seen that when you use the font bold and use in the same document, it will be might be some different. But nowadays, whatever the browser is there, there is no difference between both word processor and your browser output. It is going to be similar. Whatever you save, document, see, you will save the document PDF, open in the browser. You will see the same result. There will be no difference with the font. This means it will be available. And why it is happening? Because the available on the web developer computer. It doesn't mean that same font will be available for the users who view the site. That means what happened? Here we did a developer have done the some website and run on his machine, and that means on browser he's seeing the same result. It doesn't mean that whatever the font I have, even on my PC, I have various font for designing Photoshop. Okay. If I give the same Photoshop file, source file to edit by you, when you open that Photoshop file, it will get changed. The same way, that means that font is not there. The same way, it doesn't mean that if on a web developer, if the font is available, it doesn't mean that on every browser or every other users, they will be having the same font. It might be it will be missing. It's possible. It's not like that. Then for this resolution, how you can solve this? Then to solve that, there is something called as web font stack. That means it is the convention to supply, so called it is web font stack. So there will be a series of alternative font. In case of your usual font choice is not there on the user, then it will take from the font web font stack and it will display there. Now, how you can specify the font family? Okay, you can see here in the example. When you want to define the font family into any paragraph, the CSS first, as usual, you are going to define the per paragraph. Okay, then you are going to write font family. What you want font family? You can define font either. So use the font for the first choice. That means if on the user PC, if font Cambria is there, it will display. If it is not there, then Georgia will display. If it is not there, then Times New Roman. Times New Roman by default on every computer it will be there, even users as well as dev. Even though if it is not available, then it will go with the serif font. This is like multiple option has been given, that is for the user choice. If it is not there on their machine, then it will be display on the user machine accordingly it will take. This is the way you can define the font family. I'm not talking about only font. I'm talking about font family. So anyone it will take, whichever the first choice comes and availability on the users, then it will be. Now, when you talk about the generic font family, as we discussed, you have serif, that means Times New Roman and Georgia. When you talk about sans serif, you have in that Arial, then Verdana, you can use. When you talk about the monoscape, you have Courier New and Lucida Console, and there are a lot of things others are there also. Whatever you want, you can define, you can just refer that. When you talk about the generic font family, so this font family will support 5 different types of generic families. What are those? And where it will support? Obviously, it is going to support, your browser support will be there. And typeface from each family. Just now we saw that typeface means it will the web font, right? Which is there, it will take accordingly. You can see the example here. I'm using this here, right? When you define in the serif, right? You can see that how the T style is there, right? You can see the T style is different here, right? When you define the sans serif, when you give the sans serif, you can see that without the sans, that means now it is become normal T, okay? When you give mono escape, that means in the mono escape font, each letter will be having with the same width. You can see that in the box it has deflects. And if you use regular, then you can see that it's proportionally spaced between the font, and width will be also, it will be, each letter has been a variable width. When you define cursive, that means the cursive font family will be there. If you define fantasy, that means you can see that little bit decorative, bold, so it's look highlighted, right? Like this way, you can define the generic font family and its support into the browser. Next, when you talk about the @font face, there is a difference. @font face, this is the feature. Most of the web application today, they use @font face. Okay, and you can, let's see that because of very few past year, so most recent browser version started begin of support of @font family. Okay, so this will be like you are going to use in the different website. Okay, and this is especially because might be that font face is not there on the user system, then how it's, so this will define and will take, and this is the, for the, especially it can be defined on the responsive website, bootstrap, it will be available. You take a look on any website, definitely you will find the @font face selectors in the CSS. And this selector will allow you to use a font on your site, even if it is not installed. Previously, what we have seen, when we are defining the font family, if it is one is not there, second is not there, third is not there, fourth. But what will happen if fifth option is there? We cannot keep changing from the user point of view. That means you are going to use the font face. So when you use, even if it is not there on the user computer, automatically it will take from this selector. Now, definition and usage. That means with the @font face rule, the web designer do not have to use only web safe fonts anymore. Okay. In this, the font face rule, you must first define the name of font. That means you have to define any name of the font. Like you can define by your name, my first font, anything, whatever you want. Then you are going to point the font file. That means you'll be having a separate font file, and then it will take from that, like how we were defining in the CSS, different CSS file, and then accordingly. That is the thing here. Then same way, next, font size. You can control the font. Okay, the issue of font size is obviously, unfortunately, somewhat tricky because we don't know on the user machine what browser you have set, what font size you have set. Like even you will see that when you are printing, then sometimes like there will be the problem of the font. So that is also when printing of any word processor document, specifying a font size is unproblematic. Okay. And when you define absolute unit, we have seen already absolute unit, that means such as points and inches, then not to translate very well to pixel based device. So when you define this one in the units like points and inches, obviously it will not get changes into the pixel based wherever you define the pixel. So the now this pixel also become a problematic unit, right? So, and newer mobile devices, whatever this Android devices now we use, so all the devices having the certain pixel defined, right? Then again for that it is the difficulties, right? So now how you will define this? It's this if you have a certain issues on the application, right? Then you have to use either percentage again, or either you have to use EMS. Like if you wish to create any web layout that should work on every devices, then you should start using relatives unit, as we have seen in previous, that is relative unit and absolute unit. So we are going to use in this relative units, and it will be like EM, or you are going to use percentage for our font size. We can define in CSS. Only one of the principles of the web is that user should be able to change the size of text if he or she wish to do that. Means you can change that. If you want to change any text or font size, you can do that, the user. But it will be for time being. It's not like you will change for permanently whatever the web developer has done it. And using this percentage and EM units, it will ensure that user action will work. Okay. Then how you can use the EMS and percentage? When you are going to specify a font size, the both EM unit, okay, and the both percentage are relative to the parent font size. So parent's font size, what you are going to define accordingly. You can see here. In body tag, by default, the font size usually it's take 16 pixels. When you're defining any paragraph, by default it is 100%, or if you calculate in pixel, that is 16 pixel. If H3 font is there, it will be 125% or 1.125 EM. That means 18 pixel. Same way H2, this is the pixel in percentage. H1 is the bigger size, so 200%, 32 pixel. Okay. Now, if you want, you can define. So you should know this calculation part to define, right? Then how you are going to do in body, the font size should be 100%. That means font size, what is that? 100% pixel, that is the 16. It will 16. Now I am changing in H3, the font size should be 1.25 EM. Then how it will be there? Then where is the H3? H3 is this one, right? So H3 we know that 1.125. Okay. Then when you are going to convert, this will get converted into pixel. Okay. How? 1.25. And what is the actual pixel of your body tag? That is the 16. So 1.25 into 16 is equal to 18 pixels. So H3 size will be now 18 pixels. Similarly, the same way you will be having this is 1.5, 1.5. Now H2. For H2, what is that? Are going to multiply with this. We are going to, because already we are using for H2 that is 1.5 EM. But what is the pixel of your original? That is the parent. That is the body tag. The body tag is the 16 pixel. Multiply by 16, so 24 pixel. The similar way, 2 into 16, that is 32 pixel. Like this way, it will calculate and it will use the EMS and percentage on your application. You can use this way. Then you have seen that, like, it's pretty easy to master the things, and unfortunately cannot be quickly becomes, it's quite complicated because you have to multiply what is the exactly the things, and you have to remember that percent and EM unit which are relative to their parents. Then only you can able to calculate the size of the particular element and you can display the content accordingly, right? Furthermore, EMS and percent, you can see I have defined here the paragraph tag 16 pixel, H1 tag 32 pixel, article we have defined some 32 pixel, 16 pixel, something. Now you go to the like CSS and now accordingly you define in pixels. So you can define 1 EM, 2 EM. So 1 EM, again you know that 1 EM we have defined 1. What is the font size by default? 16. That means it will be 16 pixel for paragraph. H1, 2 EM. So 2 into 16, that is the 32 pixel. The same way you can define the pixel using the 16 scale pixel. Again, same way you can calculate. See, you can, I'm using here for H1, 2 EM, right? 2 into 16, okay, and into, because here you are going to change, right? Then accordingly, whatever you define, then it is going to be take accordingly. You can use the similar way, the different EMs and percentage you can convert, and you can make your web as a responsive according to the various devices. There is something called REM unit, right? That is the solution for font sizing hashes. Okay. This actually supports in CSS3, not in CSS2 or CSS. Okay. The REM unit means you can say that root EM unit. R for root, EM for as usual EM unit. Okay. So this is the new relative measures unit for in CSS3. This unit is always relative to the size of root element. That is the root element is your HTML. So HTML element on that it is going to be relate and the size will be calculated accordingly. However, since Internet Explorer prior to earlier version, that is the version 9, it will not support the REM units. Remember guys, if you have mostly now most of the people they do not use i9. Okay, mostly all the browser supports above 9 and obviously it will support mostly some of the government organization maybe, but they're also now i11 they are using maximum, but mostly everywhere you will see the latest version of the browser, then it will support. You can see here REM unit, how you can define the REM unit. So using 16 pixel scale you are going to use. Okay, the main parent is 100 pixel. Now you are defining font size 16 pixel, font size 1 array. What is the meaning? Why I have given two different font size for the same paragraph? Because for if you are using older version of browser, okay, then it will won't scale through this. For newer version, it will scale accordingly and it will display. The same way for article, if you are using, you are giving 75%. Okay, you are using H1 2am, so that means 2 into 16 and into 0.75 and it will become 24 pixels. Same way for paragraph, and this way you can calculate and define the this REM unit. So what we have learned from this complete section, that is what is your CSS, we have learned. We talked about the benefit of CSS. We talked about CSS syntax. We talked about the location of styles. That means embedded, external, and inline. Three different. We talked about the selectors, class selector, ID selector, pseudo selector, attribute selector, element selector. We have spoke about the how the your cascade is going to interact with your style sheet. Then we have talked about how you can define the box model. We talked about how you can style the text properties into the CSS. And that's all for the first unit. We have completed the first module, that is your HTML and CSS. Thank you.